Alright, welcome to this n8n with Google Excel guide, okay? Today we'll discuss all the Google Excel nodes, what they do, how they work, and how to use them. Let's start with the row added trigger, which automates actions when a row is added in n8n, got it? This trigger activates on a specific event, in this case when a new row is created, okay? If we press tab, go to Sheets, select it and go to Triggers, we'll see the trigger type is on row added, right? So when this trigger activates, our workspace, our workflow will start, okay? Here we have the credentials and how often we want it to check for updates. This is important because if we go to our personal space or select it as active, while the server is open or the project is in the cloud, it'll check every minute or hour if the list or document queue has been updated, okay? Then we'd select which document we want to look at, right? And which list or page within the document. Basically, here we have the settings, right? Open the trigger when a row is added, updated, or both. We can add different options, okay? Like adding a value render, which determines how the value will be displayed in the output, okay? If informed, formatted, or through formulas? Well, that depends on the type of information we're trying to export. For example, if we select formula, Google Sheets has formulas, right? Here it means the value won't be calculated, but the result will be the formula itself. Or if it's formatted, the values will be formatted and calculated based on the cell's formatting, okay? Based on the cell itself, basically. Then we also have the data location on sheet option, alright? This is to define the range where we'll check for row updates or additions, okay? We'd put the range here if we want to limit it. And finally, the date time render, okay? This is where we determine how dates should be displayed, alright? We can choose a serial number or the formatted date itself, okay? And that's it. We've now covered the Google Sheets trigger completely. How can we update processes in n8n when a Google Sheets table is updated? This is basically in trigger format and normal format, mainly in trigger format, as it ultimately executes a workspace. We can update the table, but it's not the same as constantly checking for updates. Here's our trigger, okay? We select our credentials and set how often to check, like every hour, right? We can also set the minutes if we want. We can add a pull time to check at a specific hour. For documents, we'd select from the list, choose the page, and it says trigger runs when a row updates. Include in the output the new version, old version, or both. What does this refer to? Basically, it says this option is only effective when the workflow runs automatically. Got it? This is useful if we want different info in the output, like both old and new versions. If we only want the updated table's new version, we choose that, right? This depends on how we want to extract variables from Google Sheet. Then we have two options. Columns to watch, which lets us choose from a list or use IDs. The expressions section explains more about parameters, writing expressions, and webhook. This would include a bit more programming. It specifies which columns to examine, right? If we want to look at just one column, we check the email, link, or message column, okay? This way we'd limit the number of columns we're examining. Then we have the data location and sheet, which defines a range. We specify which rows to analyze, focusing on that range instead of the whole sheet we might not need. So with this, we've properly configured this trigger. Alright, how can we automate any changes in our Google Sheet? For that, we have the Google Sheets Any Updates trigger, okay? It activates when any change occurs in our Google Sheet, like adding, updating, or deleting rows or columns, okay? So it covers all types of events, and this is the setup we have here, okay? For parameters, we have a mode to add poll time, which checks every minute or custom interval, okay? That is a specific timer, okay? Then we can select, like in all Google Sheets triggers and nodes, a document and page, and the trigger is when a row is added or updated, right? In the output, we can choose if we want to extract variables from the new version or the old one. When updating or getting new info, it's normal to use the new version or both, okay? Then we have options to configure which columns we want to view. Maybe we only want to see columns A, B, and C, email, link, and subject, right? For example, lastly, we have data location on sheet to limit where we check for new Google Sheets data. So that covers all the triggers we needed to explain. Alright, how can we create spreadsheets automatically with n8n? Okay, what's this useful for? Well, for instance, if we want to store info in a new spreadsheet, we'll create within the workflow itself each time we run it, right? We'll name the variable or page based on a variable and keep creating new pages based on the current time, etc. So we have this set of actions that says these nodes perform actions on a spreadsheet, right? A spreadsheet table. Once the workspace is initialized, okay, a worksheet is created in our Google Drive. Got it? Then we'd simply connect the credentials, set the document type, whether we want a document or just a table, or rather a page, sorry, from a document. So we'd select the document, choose the table, and from there, create a new page, right? Typically you'd pick a document, but selecting a table to create a document isn't bad either. It keeps things centralized, but making too many might get confusing when opening the file. So we have the option to create or delete, okay? Here, as you can see, you configure the title as I mentioned. It's best to set the title based on a variable. Got it? If you're just making one table, you can change it manually each time, but you don't want 40 pages with the same name, right? That's up to you, really. We can also use an expression if we want, okay? And that's it for sheets, alright? As you can see, we can also add sheets, which are pages within the document itself. You know that an Excel spreadsheet can have multiple pages within a single document. This is a way to add pages with different titles, allowing you to include various types of information. Then we have options like local, which basically specifies the format we want. If we want it in en, it's 639. 1 or n8n, which combines ISO language and country code. This is based on the country, but there's not much difference between the options. I don't think it's a crucial set. Then we have the recalculation interval, okay? This variable lets us recalculate the interval options for each cell. If we set it to default, we'll be setting a default value. If we choose on change, it means volatile functions will update with each change. If we select minute, volatile options will update on every change and every minute. And if we pick hour, it's a way to recalculate intervals in our spreadsheet, like formulas, for instance, in a calculation table or tax sheet. So it'll recalculate automatically, you see. Otherwise it won't update and we'd have to do it manually. So that's what this spreadsheet setting does. Alright, how do we add or update rows in Google Sheets? Well, we have this n8n node here that says add a new row if it doesn't exist, or update an existing row if a similar one is found, okay? For example, based on the ID, let's say, if we select it, we can see the credentials to connect resources and operations. Here we'd basically select the document, right? And well, here we already have some values. We'd have different values to send, like for the email column, we'd send a specific value, okay? We'd be sending or updating these values within the column. Right now, as you can see, I don't have any previous variables, but ideally, we drag a variable, not use a fixed one, okay? Then, in counter options, we have cell format, where we can choose n8n format or Google Sheets format. The usual approach is to use Google Sheets. We'd indicate where the data starts in the table. For instance, if there's a header row, that's the first row naming variables, right? Like A, B, and C, okay? Or message, link, etc. That's a header to label and identify each item. Then there's the first data row, which is where the actual information begins. That's how we'd set it up. Next is minimize apicals. It's about data interpretation. It's used with append, not update. It's more efficient, but can misalign data. Enable this to minimize resource use. Use it if your table has no gaps between columns or rows. That's how it works. So how can we delete all content in our Google Sheets or Drive with just one click? Well, that's where the clear sheet function comes in, right? This node basically allows us to select, I'll pick another one just in case I delete it and we freak out. We select a table here, okay? We choose a page and it asks clear specific rows, columns, arrange, or the whole page. We can skip the option to keep the first row as it's usually the header for naming data. Yeah. Why would we want to delete an entire Google Sheet? Well, maybe cleaning isn't as cool as deleting the whole document, right? So we'd select document, delete, and then choose the document. We'll need to select it using variables, as selecting it again here doesn't make sense. We can delete it directly by ID or however we prefer, okay? Basically, this would delete our document, right? This way we avoid having extra files cluttering up the drive. Got it? Deleting tables isn't recommended. We lose info that could help us improve next time, or past reports on AI work done in the document, but it's an option if needed, so that feature is available. Alright, how can we directly delete spreadsheets? I've shown you how to delete Google Sheets, right? That is Google Sheets pages. Now I'll teach you to delete a sheet called delete sheet. It's similar, but instead of deleting the whole document, we can delete just one sheet, okay? For example, it says get row, or in this case, sorry, I changed it by mistake. Let's go to delete sheet, okay? As you see, it's a delete operation. You select the document, then be careful what you select. You might delete something unintentionally. You select the document page and it'll delete just that page, not the whole document, and that's how it works. It's that simple. Alright, today I'll show you how to extract info from your Google Sheets table for later use. This is done using get rows in Sheets, okay? We've entered, right? We already have a few things selected here. We can choose a resource like a specific page or the whole document if we want, okay? Document and, oh, not the whole document, so just sheets and basically get rows, okay? We select the document and table we want, okay? Now if we hit run and extract, we'll get this data which can be used without any issues, okay? As you can see, we have titles here, we have a prompt here, and then options to combine filters, okay, and more. What kind of filters can we use? We'll see that now. For example, let's say we want to select just one column, okay? We need a value in the column that needs to be adjusted so we can extract the information from that row, right? This applies when we're working with numbers, for instance, okay? We can combine filters using the combine filter option. If we choose and all filters must be met, if or just one filter needs to be met, got it? Then we have data location on sheet, which is the range we can auto-detect or specify to limit how many cells we're reading. The output format, listed as general format, lets us choose what type of format we want, okay? If we want numbers to stay as numbers, it notes that any currency symbols will be lost, okay? Or if we want formatted values, numbers become text. So if it's dollars, it'll show as dollars, got it? For dates, it asks if we want them as January 1st, 2022, or as serial numbers like December 30th, 1899. And lastly, we have return only first matching row. Alright, and what's this for? Well, it's to select the first row in the sheet if there's a filter set up, okay? Usually the first row has titles, descriptions, etc. This lets us select or deselect that column. So yeah, it's that simple. Alright, how can we create new tabs in an n8n spreadsheet? Well, we have the create sheet option. If we select it, we can see that the operation is create. Right? We'd create a new page and select the document, okay? We'd give this document a title using a variable or a fixed title. Here we have options like adding color to the table, right? This way, it'll also have a colorful appearance. We can add a specific ID or an index if we want, okay? We can choose right to left or left to right formatting, depending on the document type. This affects information order, like alphabetical or other sorting. Then we have the hidden option, which basically allows this page to be hidden in the UI, which is the user interface. If it's set to false, it's visible. Usually it's best to keep it visible, unless it's a Google Sheets doc you use often and don't want things moving around. In that case, create a new doc instead of hiding info, but that depends on each specific case. Alright, how can we delete rows or columns in Google Sheets? We have this option called delete rows or columns. Basically, under resources sheet within document, it says delete rows or columns operation. First, we'd select the document, right? Then we choose the sheet. We're deleting rows or columns. It asks which row to start deleting from, usually row 2, as row 1 often has headers. Then we specify how many rows to delete. In this case, we'll delete one row. We can also delete columns starting from column A. And that's it. It's that simple. Very well. How to update existing rows in n8n without affecting other data type. With this video, I conclude the guide. Well, I need to give a brief explanation, so let's do that. Basically, here we set the operation to update row and select the document, sheet, and page. Here it says, mapping the column, okay? How will we map the column? By setting a value for each column or auto-mapping data that syncs with Google Sheets column. That's up to each person to choose. It says, the column to configure. It means which column to compare for updating information. We'd select the column from which we want to extract the data and so on. Here we'd input the values we want to update, like the title or description, and configure variables to update those columns or others. We can also add columns, as you can see, and set different options, such as the format we want for the information being entered. It says information located within the table. This is basically where you can locate this information, like the header row, first row, and so on. And that's it. We've now briefly explained all the nodes in n8n, specifically within Sheets. Very well. Now, I'd like to explain how to process a spreadsheet with lots of data, sending each line one by one, okay? Like what's happening here. Basically, we'd get all the cell info and apply a loop, right? The loop must come after getting the data, okay? From reading the data, if done before, it'll read all info each loop, and when using ChatGPT, it'll process once, send, and repeat. What would happen is it'd process all lines first, okay? Then send all messages at once, which isn't ideal, got it? And with that, I'm wrapping up the Google Sheets guide. Hope you enjoyed it.